It had been 51 years since the night I almost changed the course of human history by accident. 51 years since the warm Texas air carried the sound of jukebox music through an open bar door in Houston. Since a pair of green eyes stopped me in my tracks. And since I made the worst and best mistake of my life. I'm an old man now. My knees ache in the mornings, and the porch swing complains louder than I do. But tonight, the swing is still. My hands busy with an envelope the color of autumn leaves. The paper inside crackles like dry grass, holding a letter from a man long gone. An engineer at NASA, my oldest friend, and the keeper of a secret that has weighed on my chest like a cinder block. In it, he reminds me of the one thing I've never told another soul. Not my wife, not my children, not even the pastor who buried her. You see, there was a night in '69, hot, noisy, electric with the fever of the space race, when I let slip a detail I should have kept buried. It was nothing more than a drawing on a cocktail napkin, meant to impress a woman who laughed like summer rain and carried the faint scent of foreign winters. That napkin vanished, and with it my peace of mind. What followed was a blur of fear and longing. Whispers in the dark, a phone call that still wakes me in dreams, and a rainy Texas highway where headlights in the rearview looked like hungry eyes. And somewhere in that chaos there was love, or something close enough to make me believe in it again. They call the moon landing one of mankind's greatest triumphs. They celebrate the courage, the precision, the unity of a nation. But what they don't know, what I've kept locked away, is that for a few days in July it almost didn't happen. And if it hadn't, God help me, I'm still not sure whether the world would have been worse off or better. This is the story of how I prevented the moon landing, quite by accident. And it begins with a chair, a map, and a letter from the past.
Chapter 1. A chair, a map, and a letter from the past.
The porch chair has been here longer than my second hip, and it creaks like an old sailor every time I shift my weight. The boards beneath my boots groan in sympathy. Evening has settled over the Texas hills, painting the sky in soft bruises of purple and orange, and the cicadas have begun their nightly sermon. On my lap rests a map of the world, yellowed, frayed at the edges, continents faded into the color of tea stains. Most men would see it as nothing but an antique. But for me, it's a battlefield. My battlefield. The lines and marks scrawled across its surface are the coordinates of memories I have tried, and failed, to forget. In my hands is a letter. The paper is thin, brittle, the kind that threatens to tear if you breathe on it too hard. The handwriting belongs to Walter Hayes, my oldest friend, and for more than half a century, the only man who knew the truth. Walter's been dead for 6 years now, but before he went, he sent me this. The envelope arrived with no return address. Just my name. My real name, the one that hasn't been spoken aloud in decades, written in Walter's steady block letters. I unfold it for what must be the 100th time. His words are short, almost careless, but I can hear his voice behind them, carrying that mixture of mischief and warning I knew so well. Time's running out, Jack. People will start asking again. You and I are the last ones left. Maybe it's time they heard your side. I lean back, let the porch chair complain again, and close my eyes. The smell of pine sap and dust in the present dissolves into another smell: beer foam, cigarette smoke, and the faint trace of her perfume. The sound of cicadas fades, replaced by the hum of voices and the tinny melody of a jukebox somewhere in the corner. And just like that, I'm back in Houston. It was the summer of '69, a few weeks before the launch. The city was humming with a kind of electricity you could taste. Every diner, every bar, every gas station seemed to buzz with one topic: the moon. We were going to land there before the Soviets, and by God, it was going to be the biggest damn show mankind had ever seen. The bar wasn't much to look at. Sticky floor, warped stools, and a bartender who looked like he'd been poured from the same bottle he served. But it was close to the Johnson Space Center, and that meant it was full of engineers, flight controllers, and hangers-on who just wanted to breathe the same air as history. That night she walked in. Her hair was dark, straight, and pinned back the way you might expect from someone who'd been trained to keep secrets. Her dress was simple, her eyes sharp enough to slice through pretense. Someone introduced her as a translator, Russian, though no one said from where exactly. I caught the accent when she ordered her drink. Soft, controlled, dangerous. I was younger then, reckless in the way only a man in his 20s can be. I'd been working 12-hour days on the navigation systems, living on coffee and cold sandwiches, my head full of orbital trajectories and failure probabilities. So when she smiled at me from across the bar, I mistook it for luck. We talked, we laughed, and somewhere between the second beer and the third, I began to forget that not every stranger was safe. "Show me what you do," she said, leaning in so close I could smell that faint, wintry perfume again. "Explain how you make a ship find the moon." It should have ended there. I should have brushed it off, told her it was classified, gone back to my drink. But I didn't. I took a cocktail napkin and a pen and started to sketch. Just a few lines, a few circles, nothing that would make sense to anyone outside the program. Or so I thought. She watched every stroke, her eyes never leaving the page. When I looked up, she was smiling. And when I looked down again, the napkin was gone.
Chapter 2. The Race of Giants and the Cold Shadow of Fear.
For a while, I convinced myself the missing napkin meant nothing. Maybe she'd tossed it in the trash with the beer coasters. Maybe it was nothing more than a memento to tuck into a purse and forget about. But the truth has a way of growing teeth when you try to ignore it. That summer, Houston was a city straddling two worlds. One of ordinary life, gas stations, backyard barbecues, little league games, and one of unspoken urgency. In the diners near the Johnson Space Center, conversations faltered when a stranger walked in. In the hallways of Building 30, eyes lingered too long, voices dropped too low. The newspapers played their part in stoking the fire. Soviets test new rocket, cosmonauts may beat Americans to lunar surface. Every headline felt like a stopwatch ticking in my ear. But the real stories never made it to print. Whispered rumors about Soviet agents slipping into the States, about stolen schematics and intercepted transmissions. It was Walter who noticed the change in me. We'd worked side by side for 3 years, and he could read me better than my own reflection. "You look like hell," he said one night, as we hunched over a console, triple-checking telemetry data. "Is this about that girl?" I told him no, lied right through my teeth. But every time the conversation in the control room shifted to the navigation module, my throat tightened. I thought about that napkin, about the way she'd looked at me, not with admiration but with assessment, like she was measuring me for something. And then there were the phone calls. They started small, a click on the line when I picked up, dead silence. Then, a week later, the voice, low, deliberate, without a hint of accent. "You should cancel it," the caller said. No greeting, no name. "Cancel what?" I asked. A pause. In the background, I could hear it. The rhythmic hiss and slap of waves on a shore, and somewhere far off, the faint barking of dogs. "You know what," he said. "If you value their lives, you'll stop it." Click. I sat there for a long time, the receiver still in my hand, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. The "it" he spoke of didn't need explaining. The launch, Apollo 11. That night I barely slept. I dreamed of astronauts adrift in the dark, of a lunar module tumbling through the void with no guidance, of the moon itself slipping further away. And in the middle of it all was her face, pale in the starlight, unreadable. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the Cold War had infected my mind as surely as it had the politics of the world. But deep down, I knew better. One mistake, one stupid, drunken attempt to impress a beautiful stranger, had set something in motion, and there was no undoing it.
Chapter 3. A Glimmer of Hope.
It was 2 weeks after the phone call when I saw her again. I'd been running errands, trying to bury myself in the mundane. Groceries, gas, A stop at the post office where no one cared who was winning the space race. But as I drove through the south end of Houston, I spotted her through the window of a little cafe I'd never noticed before. She was alone, a porcelain cup steaming in her hands, her gaze fixed on something far away that wasn't the rain-streaked street outside. She looked different. Not polished, not calculated, but tired, the way people look when they've been carrying a weight for too long. I should have kept driving. Every instinct screamed it. But instead, I parked, stepped into the warmth of the cafe, and closed the door on the drizzle. Her eyes found me immediately. No surprise, no smile. Just a slow breath, as if she'd been waiting. "Sit," she said softly, nodding to the chair across from her. I lowered myself into it, my pulse loud in my ears. "You took something from me?" I said. "I had to," she replied. Her voice was quieter than I remembered, almost human. "But it wasn't what you think." She explained then, not in the clipped, guarded way of a spy, but like someone confessing a sin. She wasn't there to sabotage Apollo. She'd been sent to confirm whether the Americans truly had the technology to make the landing. If they didn't, her people might have tried something desperate, something that could have ended badly for both sides. The napkin? She'd passed it up the chain, yes, but not for sabotage. "I gave it to someone who wanted proof you could make it," she said. "It was to stop the race from getting dangerous." "And the phone call?" I asked. Her expression darkened. "That wasn't from me. That was someone else. Someone who thinks landing on the moon is a risk neither country should take. He believes accidents are the safest option." She leaned closer, her voice barely above the clink of cups in the cafe. "I want to stop him." It was then I noticed her hand on the table, pale, delicate, but trembling. I covered it with mine, more for steadiness than comfort. She didn't pull away. For a brief moment, the world outside that cafe felt still. There was no moon, no rockets, no shadow of two nations bristling at each other. Just two people bound by a mistake, a truth, and a dangerous hope. But that moment didn't last. The bell over the cafe door jingled, and a man in a dark coat stepped inside. He didn't order. He just watched us. Her grip on my hand tightened. "We have very little time," she whispered. "And you're not going to like what we have to do next."
Chapter 4. The Race of Giants and the Cold Shadow of Fear.
By the spring of '69, Houston didn't feel like a city anymore. Felt like a front line. On the surface, life went on. The Astros played ball, kids rode Schwinn bikes through sprinkler arcs, and women in beehive hairdos still lingered over coffee at the Woolworth's counter. But beneath that easy southern warmth, the whole place vibrated with nerves. Every TV set, every radio, every bar conversation circled back to one thing: the moon. The Soviets had landed probes. We'd lost astronauts in the Apollo 1 fire. Everyone knew the stakes. If we didn't put boots on lunar soil before them, we weren't just losing a race, we were losing face. And in '69, losing face could mean losing everything. I felt it most in the control center. Conversations stopped mid-sentence when certain people walked by. Someone was always checking the phone lines, making sure they were clean, and every so often, I'd catch a glance from across the room, sharp, assessing, as if someone was measuring how much I knew. Walter, of course, noticed. "You're jumpier than a cat on a hot roof," he told me one afternoon, flipping through data printouts. "You want to talk about it?" I didn't. Not about the bar. Not about her. Not about the missing napkin. But the news was making it impossible to pretend. Headlines spoke of Soviet cosmonauts training in secret locations. Rumors swirled that they had a rocket ready, bigger and faster than anything we'd put on a launch pad. And every time I heard it, my gut tightened because I knew with cold certainty that the navigation system could be their weak link. Or ours. Then came the phone call. It was just past midnight when the ring jolted me awake. The voice on the other end was calm, almost polite. "You should cancel it," the man said. Cancel what? He didn't answer directly. In the background, I could hear waves breaking, slow and steady, and the faint barking of dogs somewhere far off. If you value their lives, he said at last, you'll stop it. Then the line went dead. I lay awake until dawn, my mind circling the same questions. Who was he? How did he know me? And worst of all, what if he was right? Because by then, I'd stopped worrying about whether my mistake could be traced back to me. I'd started worrying about what would happen if it couldn't. And in the pit of my stomach, I felt the truth I didn't want to name. Something was coming.
Chapter 5. The Call in the Dark.
The phone's ring was a knife through my sleep. 3 short bursts, a pause, then 3 more, the way my father used to call cattle from the far pasture. It wasn't Walter's style, and it wasn't anyone who should have known my number at that hour. I fumbled the receiver to my ear. You should cancel it. The voice was calm, almost gentle. No rush, no threat. Just the kind of certainty that leaves no room for argument. Cancel what? I asked, though my stomach already knew the answer. In the background, I could hear waves breaking in steady rhythm, and somewhere far off, dogs barking, slow, deliberate, as if they too were warning me. You know what? The voice said. If you value their lives, you'll stop it. Then the click. Silence. I sat there in the dark, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the nothing. Took me a long while to realize I was holding my breath. The next day, I tried to bury myself in routine, poring over telemetry readouts, checking fuel mass ratios, running simulations until the numbers blurred into a gray smear. But no matter how far I pushed the thought away, it kept coming back. If he's right, if something goes wrong out there, I'll be the one who set it in motion. 2 nights later, I found her again. Or maybe she found me. It was a drizzly evening, Houston's air thick with the smell of wet asphalt and magnolia blossoms. I ducked into a small cafe on the city's south side, the kind of place where no one lingered after closing and the waitress knew every customer's name. She was in the corner booth, hands wrapped around a coffee cup, eyes tracking me the moment I walked in. She didn't smile, didn't wave, just waited. You've been followed, she said, when I slid into the seat across from her. By who? I don't know, but not by me. Her voice was softer now, less sharp than the night at the bar. The napkin, it wasn't what you think. I didn't give it to anyone who could harm your astronauts. I gave it to someone who needed proof you could make it. It was to stop my people from taking a risk they couldn't survive. I stared at her, trying to read the truth in her face. She didn't blink. The call I got. She shook her head. Not me. That was someone else. Someone who believes the landing must fail, for both our sakes. And he won't stop. Outside, headlights slowed as a black sedan eased past the cafe window. The driver didn't look in, but I felt the weight of his presence all the same. She reached across the table, her hand brushing mine. Light, almost accidental. If we don't move fast, it won't matter who's first on the moon. There will be no moon landing at all, and maybe no astronauts to bring home. In that moment, I understood 2 things. I couldn't trust her completely. I couldn't let her out of my sight. And somewhere, just beneath the fear, there was something else. Something I hadn't felt since before the war. The dangerous pull of wanting to believe her.
Chapter 6. A Fragile Alliance.
The rain had stopped by the time we left the cafe, but the streets still shone with the slick reflection of neon and tail lights. She walked beside me, silent, her coat pulled tight against the damp air. I didn't know her real name. I wasn't sure I wanted to. We drove in my battered Ford, the wipers squeaking across the windshield. The black sedan was gone, or at least, far enough behind to make me wonder if it had been my imagination. She told me just enough to make me wish I knew more. The man who called me? He wasn't working for her government. He was what she called a free agent. A man who believed the moon race was a fuse waiting to burn down the world. If either country plants their flag, she said, he fears the other will light the match. He means to keep that from happening, no matter the cost. And you? I asked. She hesitated. I believe some races are worth winning, but not if we kill the runners to do it. We pulled into the shadow of an empty warehouse. Inside, she led me through a side door and up a set of metal stairs to an office lit only by a desk lamp. On the table lay a manila envelope, thick with papers. These, she said, are transmissions from someone inside your program. He's feeding information to the wrong people. If you get these to your flight director, they'll know where the danger is. I picked up the envelope. The weight of it felt heavier than paper. What's in here that could stop him? I asked. Her eyes locked on mine. Enough to save the astronauts. Or enough to prove I've been lying to you this whole time. We stood there a moment longer than we should have. Close enough for me to smell that faint winter perfume again. Close enough for my hand to brush hers as I took the envelope. It was a foolish, dangerous closeness, but in that damp, humming room, it felt like the only honest thing between us. When we stepped back outside, the air was colder. She looked up at the night sky, at the pale arc of the moon just clearing the rooftops. If we succeed, she said, you will hate me for what comes after. If we fail, you will hate yourself. I didn't have an answer, not then. The Ford started on the first try, but as we pulled away, I caught sight of headlights in the rear view, low, steady, and far too familiar. The sedan was back. And it wasn't alone this time.
Chapter 7. Rain on the highway.
The wipers couldn't keep up. Rain sheeted across the windshield, blurring the road into a smear of silver and black. The Ford's tires hissed over the slick asphalt, the steering wheel twitching in my hands with every gust of wind. In the rear view, the black sedan's headlights stayed low and steady, twin coins of pale fire. Another set appeared behind it, then another. We weren't just being followed anymore. We were being herded. She sat rigid in the passenger seat, the manila envelope clutched tight against her chest. The streetlights flashed over her face in quick, uneven strokes, pale, determined, afraid. How far? She asked, her voice taut. 20 minutes if they don't run us off the road, I said, my knuckles white on the wheel. Her eyes flicked to the mirror. They'll try. We hit the on-ramp to the highway, the Ford's engine growling as I pushed it harder than I ever had. The rain turned every headlight into a halo, every shadow into a threat. The sedan closed the gap, its grille filling my mirror. Then it surged forward, swerving just enough for me to see the driver's face. Calm, almost bored, as if this were just another job. Hold on, I said, and cut hard into the left lane. The tires lost grip for a heartbeat, the car fishtailing before catching again. The sedan matched the move effortlessly. A flash of memory hit me. The smell of her perfume that first night, the glint in her eyes when I sketched the module, the way she'd said we don't have much time. Back then, I thought it meant weeks. Now I understood it meant minutes. One of the trailing cars pulled alongside, its passenger window lowering. I didn't see a gun, but I didn't need to. My foot slammed the accelerator, the Ford's engine roaring like it wanted to break free from the chassis. They'll kill us for this, I said. Then drive like you want to live, she shot back. A semi-truck loomed ahead, its taillights glowing red through the spray. I yanked the wheel, squeezing between it and the median, the Ford's side mirror scraping concrete. Behind us, metal screamed. One of the sedans clipped the truck and spun out, vanishing in a burst of sparks. We didn't cheer. We didn't breathe. There were still two left. Her hand found mine on the gearshift, squeezing once. Not for comfort, but for courage. I squeezed back. And for a fleeting, impossible moment, it felt like we might actually make it. Then the lead sedan's lights disappeared from the mirror. Took me a second to realize why. It wasn't behind us anymore. It was ahead. Waiting.
Chapter 8. When the world held its breath.
The sedan ahead tried to block us, but I dropped the Ford into the narrow strip between the guardrail and its bumper, sparks leaping where metal kissed concrete. She held the envelope tight to her chest, her jaw set, eyes locked on the road ahead as if willing us forward. The NASA complex rose out of the rain like a fortress, squat buildings lit in harsh white, the flags snapping under the storm's wind. Somewhere inside, the countdown had already started. We skidded to a stop by the security gate. I shoved my badge at the guard, my voice breaking with urgency. Flight ops. Emergency priority. The guard didn't even glance at her, just waved us through. I hit the gas, the tires spitting water, the Ford fishtailing around the last turn before the vehicle assembly building. Inside, the control room was a cathedral of light and sound. Rows of consoles, banks of glowing monitors, the voice of the flight director steady in the air. T-6 minutes. My heart slammed against my ribs. We weren't going to have another chance. Walter's eyes found mine from across the room. No smile, no nod. Just the quick flicker of recognition before he rose from his console and intercepted us near the back corridor. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed. "Saving the crew," I said, thrusting the envelope into his hands. "You need to stop the launch." His eyes darted over the contents, radio logs, telemetry anomalies, a diagram of a critical fault that matched my own work far too closely. The color drained from his face. "You realize what this means?" he said quietly. "If you're wrong, you end the mission. You end everything." Behind us, the big clock on the wall ticked down to T-5 minutes. I looked at her. She didn't speak, didn't smile, but in her gaze I saw the same thought that was rattling in my skull. If we stayed silent, we might be sending 3 men to die where no one could bring them home. "Walter," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "pull the plug." For a moment I thought he wouldn't. Then he turned, striding toward the flight director's console. The announcement came 30 seconds later. Hold at T-4 minutes. Technical issue. Stand by. A ripple went through the room. Confusion, frustration, relief. And in that suspended moment, with the world holding its breath, I knew there was no going back. I just ended the most important launch in history. She touched my arm, light, brief, almost lost in the noise. "You did the right thing," she said. But her eyes told me she knew the cost.
Chapter 9. The Price of Salvation.
The launch never happened. On television, Walter stood behind the flight director and spoke of a last-minute technical anomaly and an abundance of caution. The press dutifully repeated the words. The public groaned, shook their heads, and speculated over coffee about how much it had cost to delay the most important mission in American history. Inside NASA, the tone was different. There were no groans, no jokes, only tight jaws and quiet meetings behind closed doors. Engineers worked double shifts, combing through every system for signs of the fault that had supposedly stopped the countdown. I could feel eyes on me in the corridors, the kind that follow you too long. Walter never said my name. Not once. But he didn't have to. I knew the investigation was narrowing, and I knew what would happen if it found me at the center. She was gone by the time I looked for her. The little cafe was shuttered, its windows dark, no forwarding address. I asked the owner if he knew where she'd gone. He just shook his head. Came in one morning, cleared her things, left without a word. The envelope, the one that had changed everything, never came back to me. Walter kept it locked in a secure file, and whatever he did with it afterward, he took to the grave. For weeks, I half expected to see her in a crowd or catch the ghost of her perfume in a hallway. but she had vanished as completely as if the rain had washed her from the city. When Apollo 11 finally launched weeks later, I watched from the back of Mission Control. The room erupted in cheers when the Saturn V cleared the tower, but my chest felt hollow. I told myself I should feel relief, that the systems had been triple-checked, that the crew was safer than they'd ever been. But all I could think about was how close we'd come to losing them, and how, in saving them, I'd lost her. Walter caught my eye as the booster disappeared into the clouds. He didn't smile, just gave the smallest nod, the kind that says you did what you had to do. I carried that nod like a medal, but medals are cold things. They don't warm you at night. And no matter how many years passed, the empty space beside me never stopped feeling like a consequence.
Final chapter. The truth at last.
The porch swing groaned as I leaned back, the last light of evening pooling in the creases of the hills. The air smelled of cut grass and wood smoke, and the cicadas were tuning up for their night symphony. On my lap lay the map, its edges curled like old leaves. My fingers traced the faded pencil marks I'd made half a lifetime ago. Houston, the Cape, a dot in the middle of the Pacific where the recovery ship once floated. And on top of that map rested Walter's letter, the paper so thin I could almost see through it. I'd read it 100 times, but tonight the words seemed heavier. Time's running out, Jack. People will start asking again. You and I are the last ones left. Maybe it's time they heard your side. Walter had been gone 6 years. Most of the men in Mission Control were gone, too. The world had moved on, to space shuttles, to Mars rovers, to private companies selling rides beyond the atmosphere. The moon was just a chapter in a history book now. And yet, every July, when the television showed grainy footage of Armstrong's first step, I felt that familiar tightening in my chest. Not pride, not regret, something stranger, the knowledge that the history everyone believed was almost something else entirely. I thought of her. 50 years, and I could still see her face in the rain-streaked glass of that cafe window. The set of her jaw when she said, "We have very little time." The way her hand squeezed mine in the Ford, not like a lover, but like a soldier sharing a foxhole. If she hadn't been there that night, if I hadn't drawn that damn napkin, if Walter hadn't trusted me enough to act, 3 men might never have come home, and the world might have remembered the moon not as a triumph, but as a grave. I unfolded the letter again, hearing Walter's voice in my head. Maybe it's time. For 50 years, I'd carried the story like a classified file locked in my chest. I'd convinced myself I was protecting her, protecting Walter, protecting myself. But the truth wasn't mine to keep anymore. I set the letter on the table beside me, reached for the recorder I'd bought that morning in town, and clicked it on. "My name is Jack McAllister," I began. My voice was rough, but steady. "And I'm going to tell you how I prevented the moon landing, by accident." The swing creaked, the cicadas sang. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then went quiet. And for the first time in half a century, I felt the weight in my chest begin to lift.